The year is 1942. Deep within the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North African desert, a secret war is being waged, a war of shadows, steel, and silence. While massive armies clashed at El Alamein and Tobruk, small, elite units ventured far beyond the front lines where survival itself was a victory. This is the story of one such mission, a daring German operation, codenamed Salamander, a ghost-like incursion deep into British-held territory. The mission's objective was audacious: to penetrate hundreds of kilometers of hostile desert, gather intelligence on a critical British supply depot near the Qattara Depression, and, if possible, cripple its operations. Leading this desperate gamble was Hauptmann Klaus von Richter, a veteran of the Brandenburgers, Germany's premier special forces unit. He was a man forged by the desert, his face a testament to the relentless sun and sand. His team consisted of just 12 men, handpicked for their endurance, navigational skills, and unwavering nerve. They were specialists, radio operators, demolition experts, and mechanics, each a master of his craft. Their vehicles were not the mighty Tigers or Panzer IVs that dominated the headlines. Instead, they relied on a handful of captured British long-range desert patrol trucks, modified for extreme endurance. Extra water tanks, oversized tires, and concealed compartments for weapons and explosives made these vehicles their lifeline. Every liter of fuel, every drop of water, was meticulously calculated. There was no room for error. The operation began under the cloak of a moonless night. Engines growled to life, their sound quickly swallowed by the immense silence of the great sand sea. Von Richter, navigating by the stars and a well-worn compass, led his small convoy into the abyss. Their orders were strict, complete radio silence. They were utterly a lone dot for the outside world. They had ceased to exist. Their only companions were the whisper of the wind and the constant, grinding fear of discovery. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of heat, dust, and tension. The sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the steel and flesh alike. Temperatures soared, turning the truck cabins into ovens. Water was rationed with painful precision, just enough to stave off collapse. The men, their uniforms stained with sweat and grime, scanned the horizon endlessly. Every distant dust cloud, every shadow on the dunes, could signal a British patrol or a nomadic tribe whose allegiance was unknown. Navigating the featureless terrain was a monumental challenge. One wrong turn could lead them into an impassable salt marsh or leave them stranded miles from any viable route. Von Richter relied on pre-war geological surveys and his own uncanny instinct. He pushed his men and himself to the very edge of human endurance. At night, huddled around a tiny, shielded fire, they would study their maps, their faces illuminated by the faint glow, speaking only in hushed tones. The camaraderie in such isolation was their greatest strength, a bond of shared hardship and unspoken trust. After 10 grueling days, they reached the vicinity of their target. Concealing their trucks in a steep-sided wadi, Von Richter and 2 of his best scouts proceeded on foot. Dressed in captured British uniforms, they crept for miles under the cover of darkness, the distant hum of generators growing louder with every step. What they discovered was beyond their expectations. The supply depot was far larger than intelligence had suggested, a sprawling city of tents, fuel dumps, and ammunition stacks, lightly guarded but vital to the British Eighth Army's offensive capabilities. The original plan was simple reconnaissance, but seeing the vulnerability of the depot, von Richter made a bold decision. This was an opportunity they could not afford to miss. Returning to their hidden base, the team prepared their limited explosives. The new plan was fraught with risk, a simultaneous strike on the primary fuel and ammunition dumps. It was a suicide mission, but one that could change the strategic balance in the desert, if only for a short time. Under the faint light of a crescent moon, the team split into 3 groups. Each man knew his role, his target, his path. They moved like phantoms through the British camp, the sand muffling their footsteps. The air was thick with the smell of petrol and the cold sweat of anticipation. Time seemed to slow down as they placed the charges, the delicate click of the timers counting down the final seconds of their operation, and perhaps their lives. With the charges set, they began their silent, desperate retreat. Every shadow seemed to hold an enemy. Every sound was a potential alarm. As they scrambled back towards the wadi, the night suddenly erupted behind them. A series of brilliant, blinding flashes lit up the horizon, followed a moment later by a deep, rumbling roar that shook the very ground beneath their feet. A massive fireball billowed into the sky, turning night into a terrifying, flickering day. The fuel dumps had ignited, setting off a chain reaction through the ammunition stacks. The mission was a success, but their ordeal was far from over. The explosions had turned them from ghosts into the most hunted men in North Africa. British patrols, now fully alerted, would be swarming the area. The return journey would be a race against time, a desperate flight through a desert now crawling with enemies. Von Richter pushed his men and their worn-out vehicles harder than ever. They drove through the day, a risky move that exposed them to aerial patrols, but they had no choice. One afternoon, a lone British Hurricane fighter spotted their dust trail. The plane swooped down, its machine guns spitting fire. The men scattered as bullets stitched patterns in the sand around their trucks. One vehicle, carrying most of their remaining water, was hit and burst into flames. The loss was catastrophic. With dwindling supplies and the enemy closing in, their chances of survival plummeted. But they did not surrender. Cannibalizing parts from the wreck, they got the remaining trucks moving and pressed on, their resolve hardened by desperation. After what felt like an eternity, dehydrated and exhausted, the survivors of Operation Salamander stumbled back across German lines. Of the 13 men who had ventured into the void, only 7 returned. They were gaunt shadows of their former selves, but they brought back priceless intelligence and had struck a significant blow against the enemy. Their story was never told in the official communiques. They were ghosts, their deeds buried in the sands of secrecy, their names lost to the grand narrative of the war. They were just one of countless small units whose courage and sacrifice unfolded far from the world's gaze, in the silent, lonely theaters of a global conflict. Their legacy is not one of glory, but of sheer, unyielding will in the face of impossible odds. If this hidden story moved you, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More forgotten heroes are waiting to be remembered.